Hollywood continues to struggle with movies coming out in September, but one show came out kicking ass and taking names.
More like taking heads.
Yeah, that's right. So we watched The Woman King, so you know what time it is. Hit that intro! Woo!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
All right, everybody, if it's your first time joining us, welcome. We're two dads who love all things fandom, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Marvel to DC, and Middle-earth on down to Westeros. We love it all, and we want to bring all of our insights and love of all things nerdy to you, our viewers. So if that's your flask of whiskey, we're here for you, and you should definitely subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on all the amazing reviews and insight that we bring to all of our favorite fandoms. So thanks for tuning in, guys. My name is Chris Matthews, and I'm joined by the impressive man of the hour, Mr. Matt Parham. How you doing today, brother?
What can I say? Doing all right. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing great. To all the fans out there, everybody loves him, Matt Parham. So welcome to the show. Yeah. Glad you're not driving today. We love it. So
yeah.
Let's get into The Woman King, right?
In the studio. That's right. Yes.
Yep.
The Woman King. Set in the year 1823 in the African Kingdom of Dahomey. Viola Davis. Yeah, Dahomey. Am I saying it right? Throughout the movie, they chant it. They say it multiple times. Yep. Dahomey. Yeah. But Viola Davis, she portrays General Naniska, leader of the Agojie, which is a special unit of the Dahomey military, comprised entirely of women warriors who conduct nighttime raids on encampments of the neighboring Oyo Empire in order to free captives that would otherwise be eventually sold to the Portuguese slave trade. We're soon introduced to Nawi, played by newcomer Thus Mbedu, a young recruit of the Agojie whose training we follow closely throughout the first half of the film. Mm-hmm. And we also see that King Gizo, played by John Boyega of Star Wars fame, has the Dahomey nation also involved in the slave trade. And this, of course, is a point of consternation between him and General Naniska, who struggles with this aspect of both her service to the king as she fights to find a new path for her nation out of the shadow of the Oyo Empire, as well as the bonds of the slave trade. So a lot to unpack here, buddy, and I'm anxious to get right into it. What do you say?
All right. Do we want to give our initial impressions before we dive into the meat of this episode? So,
absolutely, yeah. For those of you that haven't seen the movie yet, we're not going to give any spoilers away in this initial section, just give you the basics of what we thought of the movie, and then we'll move on to more in-depth analysis afterwards. So, what'd you think of this film, Chris?
Oh, man.
Broad strokes.
From start to end, like, the action in this was so authentic and fantastic. Like, it blew my mind. That first whole scene was amazing. The performances in this are emotional. You feel impacted by this. And this is insightful, too, because we have a lot of stories about, the American U.S. history and things like that. But we don't, I don't get exposure in entertainment and media for a lot of the history in Africa. So it was very insightful to see this movie, too, and to see a kingdom that operates this way. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. We've had like Invictus and a couple of Mandela biopics and things of that nature, but not the more ancient sort of history, which it's not technically ancient, I guess, with it taking place in 1823, but this is definitely a story that we have not seen out of Hollywood. I think probably ever.
Not at all. So I absolutely enjoyed that fact, and I love it's refreshing to see a movie that takes place outside of the superhero genre or the sci-fi genre or anything like that, and to find these stellar performances in this movie. So I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it for you, our audience out there, to go check this out while you can in theaters. It's definitely one you want to see in the movie theater if you can. We went in on Friday and there was nobody else there, and that was a crying shame. It's like, so if you have the time, go to the movies and see this. And what did you think, Matt?
Yeah, September has always been an awkward month, and this year in particular, theaters are really struggling to get people.
They really
seats.
are.
They're doing lots of things like National Cinema Day and Movie Mondays. I know Alamo's doing things on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So they're trying to get people in. And I think if more folks would just try these movies out that are kind of outside what we're normally seeing in theaters these days, they'd be pleasantly surprised. We talked about that with 13 Lives, which briefly was given a theatrical release in July. And now we have The Woman King, and I think people need to go see it because, like you said, it's full of stellar performances. And the setting is absolutely beautiful. The color that was throughout both the animals that you saw, throughout the African wilderness, the colors of the uniforms and the jewelry that everybody wore, even the palace and how it was decked out.
The set design, the wardrobe, everything was spot on, just perfect in my opinion. So it was beautifully done.
Yeah, very impressive to see. And we got a story that fleshes out these characters to a degree that I don't think we necessarily get in all of these historical warfare type films.
No.
So that was refreshing. I really felt like it was something new in this genre of film. And so for me, I enjoyed it as you did, pretty much the entire way. And I think that my recommendation would be, if you love the performances of Viola Davis in the past, you're definitely going to like this one. It's unlike any character that I've seen her play yet. If you enjoy the historical warfare genre, you're definitely going to love this. And if you enjoy seeing a part of the world that you don't necessarily get exposed to all the time, I think this is definitely something that will interest you. So there's a lot to love about this film, Chris. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and there's a whole world of history out there that we just don't get to see. So I love that we're elevating and highlighting this history now. And so that in itself is worth a watch. So you guys should definitely go check it out. And hats off to the writer of this show, Dana Stevens. She wrote the screenplay on this, and the story was by Maria Bello and Dana Stevens. So it was just pitch perfect. I love that. The writing is amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
So
very, very well done. The plot is very thoughtful. A lot of payoff in this movie from things that they start off at the very beginning, and it feels very authentic. And we'll get into the levels of detail that they drew from the actual historical events in our in-depth analysis section. And I don't know, Chris, are you ready to get to it?
Yeah, I'm ready to go, Matt. This is going to be fun. It's going to be spoilerific. So guys, if you haven't seen it, sorry, go ahead and pause this show right now. Come back to it, circle around once you've seen the movie, and play at this point in time. Let's get right into it, Matt. Woo!
All right. Well, so for my review, I would like to call out the performances, the actors specifically. Of course, we have Viola Davis. Many of you have seen her in The Help or Suicide Squad playing Amanda Waller. And as I mentioned before, this is unlike any of those roles. We have a very regal performance going on here that's layered with heartbreak and
like an onion,
past wrongs. Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of thought at the beginning of this movie we were going to get a really sort of one-sided militaristic performance out of Viola Davis, which again is completely against type for her. but she does so well with all the emotional scenes of staying stoic, but then breaking whenever she just can't take any more of the tension or of the irony of what's going on in the plot and in her home country around her. So it's pretty amazing to watch. I was very impressed.
Absolutely. Viola Davis has always been one of the best dramatic actors out there. And, just not only did her performance just rise to this occasion, but her physicality as General Naniska in this movie was...
Oh, yeah. You buy it
amazing.
The whole time that she could really hack off somebody's head.
You really could. And they trained so intensely for this movie. And hats off to the fight choreographer, Janelle Stevens. She's the one that trained all of them. And the fights look so authentic thanks to that choreographer, Janelle Stevens. Viola Davis and all the other Agojie trained for months to fight the way that they do in the movie.
Yeah.
And it definitely shows on screen.
I tell you, this is something that they have historical record of, that they can draw pretty detailed stuff from. And things like what we saw in the training camp as the end test of running through the thorn bushes and having to decapitate the dummies and all that sort of thing, drawn right from the historical record. They really did that stuff. And I mean, they did not spare on the details here.
It was so fascinating getting to see like their training routine and everything. Because, if you're a fan of any historical war movie or anything like that, we always usually get like the boot camp scene or anything like that. So I always find this entertaining. I love seeing the training. And so I absolutely loved seeing a different type of training with this. I really like the fact that this kingdom is set up to be sort of equal when it comes to men and women. When it comes to the King's Guards as well, they had the men in one faction and they had the women in the other faction. And, in the court and everything, they had women that were, commoners that were just as revered as the men. Viola Davis, her character in this, Naniska, she had a lot of say with the king. And I thought that was amazing. And something you didn't see in the 1800s a lot. So it was really cool to get to see that aspect portrayed in this film.
Yeah. And I think what was exceptional is Thuso Mbetu's performance as Nawi. We really understood the struggle of the recruits going through that training process. And her character specifically is given such ferocity and vulnerability at the same time. It makes for a stunning performance by this fairly new actress, 21 years old, and she portrays this little girl, to me, is what she appeared to be, maybe in her teenage years or something, going through these situations that just seem so perilous. And, as a parent, you recognize the sort of danger that's out there and some of the parental leanings of the more adult characters worried about her going through all of this. And, man. Like I said, it's heartbreaking to watch.
It was Thuso Mbetu did an amazing job with Nawe, because like at the beginning of the film, it's like she is very much portrayed as this young girl, and her father wants to basically sell her off to a husband and whatnot. And that's something in the 1800s that happened a lot. Like people were in can't talk, and that's something that happened to girls a lot in that time. And it's really sad, but like she stood up against that and didn't want that for her life. And so seeing her character arc was amazing in this, seeing how strong she became and the lessons that she learned and that she imparted onto the Najawi as well was pretty amazing.
What I thought was pretty cool is so Nawe in particular, the characters in this movie are largely fictional. They're not part of the historical record. This movie is told, given sort of the broad strokes of what it was like to be one of the Agojie warriors. And we'll get a little bit more into the details of that in a minute. But Nawi herself is based on someone that British settlers did document as having existed. In fact, she, the character that, she, the real person that I was based on, actually died in 1979, and she was the last of the Agojie warriors to die that that had battle experience.
Yeah.
So they were able to draw a lot of inspiration from her story as she started very young in the Agojie troops, and it was pretty impressive to see that portrayed in this movie.
Right? Yeah. So hats off to that actress. Hats off to that character. And that was our emotional through line throughout this film. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And oh boy, man, the standout actor for me in this has got to be Lashawna Lynch as Agojie. Oh my God,
she's awesome in everything she does, man.
Right? And if you guys don't know, she played a little bit of a part in Captain Marvel and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah,
she
and
was
both
Maria
of those
Rambeau.
movies, right? She's not in either one of those very long, but she just tears it up whenever she is there. You know,
every scene that she's in,
said,
especially in this, like it just lights up the room. I don't know what it is, but she has got charisma out the yin yang. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
Like I loved her performance in this, and it was really cool. Like she acts as kind of like an older sister to Nawi throughout this, taking care of her, being there for her, supporting her through this, or as a mentor, I guess, as well. And I love that relationship and how they actually affected each other. So Nawi, during her final test and everything, goes back into the thorns and helps that girl. And, you know, they're like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you should just focus on yourself, because, like,
and the freaking payoff at the end,
and the
just
payoff,
like,
that's what I'm talking about. And seeing Agojie killed me too, because, like, you know, those hard-earned warrior lessons are absolutely true. Like, in the heat of battle and everything, going back and trying to help your friend like that get through that, and not letting them figure out how to get through it themselves, will ultimately hurt both of you. And we see that paid off in the end there, as sadly as Agojie does get shot in the back, and so emotional.
Going back.
Yeah.
Just like she told Nawi not to do. I mean, I was just, the scene came out of the projector even slower in my mind than what was being actually projected. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to take that one again.
Okay.
The scene came off even slower than what was being projected in the theater to me, because I was putting it all together like, wow, they're escaping, and no one's shot them yet. No one's hurt them yet. No one's captured them yet. At some point, aren't they going to, you know, get some kind of resistance here? Oh no, they're going to shoot her. And then it happened, and like, oh man, she said not to go back, and she's. I mean, it was just all crashing down. The entire theater collapsed on my head at that point. I was done.
I'm glad you're still with us with all the collapsing theater debris.
Yeah.
But that's the thing I love the most about this movie too, is there was real stakes in this. It's like, you know, you see some of these movies where they prop up these heroes and everything, and everybody gets out unscathed. Not so with this movie. There are people that get hurt. There are people that die. It's very real and authentic in that manner, and I absolutely love that about this. So that authenticity is definitely a huge mark for me in this film in itself. And like I said, like Agojie was my favorite character in this. It was sad to see her go, but man, that character, you know, and all of these actors, hats off to them for portraying this level of strength in their performance. When Agojie was captured at the end there and had a broken arm, and now we had to set it back into place. Just that look on her face and trying to keep it together and kind of hide the broken arm and everything. And just that strength, the strength and just the mental fortitude that you have to do that was all on screen. She killed it in this performance. So Lashawna Lynch, you are one hell of a good actor.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think that John Boyega did a brilliant job as King of Dahomey here.
Same, dude. Like, you know, and
it was him.
Yes. He did a fantastic job as King Gizo. Like, and this is actually based off of a real king too, right, Matt? We have historical evidence for this character, and John Boyega. Like, I give it up for him, and I really didn't like how they portrayed his character in the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. Some of you out there might really enjoy the sequel, and that's fine and good. But I felt like they dropped the ball with John Boyega's character. He didn't get a lot in there. And this movie in itself shows that he has the range and ability to do something. And I remember seeing John Boyega in Attack of the Block way back in the day.
Right.
When I first found out that he was going to be in Star Wars, and I was so excited because he brought it for that movie as well. Yeah. And so we get to see that again in this actor. So hats off to you, John Boyega.
But yeah, it was a great portrayal by John Boyega. He had this just sort of royal entitlement.
Yeah.
The entire time, this confidence about him that he's a seasoned leader, politician, and heir to the throne. Because very much it was a patriarchy back in those days,
right?
And his son took over after he was done leading. So he has that sort of pompous feel to him, and I've never seen him portray a character that has that arrogance.
No.
And so, like you said, it was quite the range that we got to see. I really hope that after this movie, we get all sorts of new roles for all these actors involved, because they just brought it. They brought their A game, and it was wonderful to see.
And that's the most beautiful thing about this movie is I want to see all these actors in future roles. And they're, like you said, they absolutely brought it. Absolutely. And so one of the biggest critiques I had with this film. So let's dive into some of the things that we didn't enjoy about this. And it's okay to have things that you don't enjoy about a movie. Overall, I love this movie, but there are things that I didn't find to my taste. One of the things was I really didn't care for that French slave trader subplot. I really didn't think that we needed this hunky guy coming and kind of enticing Naui.
It seemed like way out of left field. Those are the edits that I was talking about. Some of the scenes where, like, especially towards the end, where Naui comes out to the balcony, like, in a towel, I thought, wait, was there, like, a weird sort of sex scene right in there that we didn't...
No.
They must have cut from the movie. All of a sudden, he's topless, and she's in a blanket. Like... Because they made it pretty clear that the Agojie are not supposed to... Their chastity is supposed to be maintained. Right. In real life, actually, they were considered as wives of the king, and so no one was allowed to, sleep around, and this would have been very much frowned on, and Naui would have probably been executed.
Yeah, that makes sense that they were thought of like the king's sort of wives, because they had to live there in the king's palace and everything. They couldn't leave there. That does make sense. So it's really insightful. But
right.
For that, at that point in time in the movie, I believe that Naui's clothes were like bloody and everything, so she had to take them off, and so she had to change her clothes at that point.
Okay.
So
I guess that explains that one then. But the whole, like you said, the whole love story just seemed a little bit awkward and forced, and I totally unnecessary to me.
Absolutely. I agree. I don't think it was necessary in there. I don't think it really added a whole lot of tension or drama to this movie. I kind of like where they're going. I can kind of see where they were what they were trying to do. They wanted a character to tempt Naui and show that she eventually was going to stay true to the Agojie. So, but I don't think it was necessary. I think everything that they went through, it's something that I would have cut from the film. So,
right. Yeah. I also felt like the film lacked some of the production value, meaning specifically monetary value, that I wish we could have seen. And this is by no means any fault of the people that worked on the film. It was actually very hard for Gina Prince-Bythewood, if I'm saying that correct, the director of the movie, as well as Maria Bello, just to get this movie produced. Whenever they first put out the story in Hollywood, they only acquired about $5 million worth of financing to begin with, and which is definitely not enough money for those of you that don't study this kind of stuff.
Movie making.
It's not enough to make a war picture at all. And so luckily they gained some ground over several years of struggle. But even with the budget that they did get, what I found fascinating is that it really visually didn't hold a candle to what actually happened. That at their prime, the Agojie warriors numbered about 6,000 troops for the Dahomey, and they were one faction of the military. The Dahomey nation was known for having a stand-up military year-round, whereas other African nations or empires would seasonally train their troops, and then once there was no more fighting to be had, they would go back to farming or doing whatever it was that they did before being in the army. And so that separated the Dahomey as being a militant power that was very difficult to deal with. And part of their success was that they were constantly training. So I liked seeing the training sequences. It just would have been cool to see many more than just kind of the handful of troops that we got in a lot of the war sequences. So it's, not necessarily the fault of anybody that worked on the movie. It's what we got with the budget that they had.
Yeah, and so for the budget that they had, I think they pulled off something amazing. So could we have seen more if they had a higher budget? Absolutely. But this, I loved every minute of this. And man, for me, the Agojie not only were these real life Amazons, but the way that they operate, to circle back to Star Wars, this is kind of like the Jedi Order. If you think about it, they vowed never to marry, they train hard to protect the king, and live within the compound of the kingdom's palace and everything. Kind of the same thing exactly the same thing that George Lucas uses for the Jedi. So it was really cool to see an actual historical representation of that in this movie. So I was like, oh man, I have to make this comparison.
Well, and one thing that I'm glad that they portrayed in the training and just in the militant power of the Agojie here is that they were well versed in the sword, the rope, the forget what they call it, but they basically had a weapon that was a bludgeoning device. But they were also very good archers, and we didn't see much of that in the film. They actually had a very skilled archery unit as part of the Agojie warrior training, as part of the Dahomey military. And I would have loved to see a little bit more of that. But again, it's expensive to put flying objects up into the air for any of these war films. And so I imagine that's probably why we didn't see much of it here.
True. Did you have any more history, Matt, on...
Yeah, I found it very fascinating when looking up what these women were capable of, because one of the things that they did was instill fear in the people that they were attacking. The other nations around them were very well aware of the legend of the Agojie, much like we see in the film.
I absolutely love that when they're coming back and they're marching back into the king's palace, and everybody has their heads on there, and you're not supposed to look at them and everything, and that level of reverence is amazing, and that level of fear, you feel it. It's palpable in that first scene, when Viola Davis is coming out of the grass and everything, and the whole Agojie warrior women come out. It's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So they portrayed that very well in this film.
Right. Well, and they also portray the accuracy of decapitations as being part of what made them so scary. Is that, a lot of warriors fight and are fearful of actually inflicting damage to another human being's head or face. I mean, it's still true of warriors today. They find that even sniper brigades, people are mostly aiming for the chest. That it's hard to get
center
snipers
mass
that will actually aim for a person's head. Which just speaks to the human condition overall. But these women were known and trained for decapitations. In fact, whenever they would come back from a battle, they would largely present the heads as trophies to King Gizo. And so there's a whole fascinating history that you can read up on. So no, I mean, they were definitely known for their fear tactics in battle, for their cunning. I couldn't find anything specific to like the munition type of things that they use in one of the last battles of the movie, but they were known for not necessarily being the type that would just come right at you. Certainly they had a regimented military, and so they would march out to a battlefield in force, but they also employed tactics of infiltrating encampments at night. And so I'm glad that the movie puts all of these on display.
On Front Street, yeah.
Yeah, right on Front Street. So very cool history. If you get a chance, look up the Agojie warriors through sites like the Smithsonian website. I highly recommend. And you'll find a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, and I was really interested in just like the Dahomey Kingdom as itself in history as well. And if you guys don't know, it is a kingdom that was in Western Africa. It flourished around the 18th and 19th century. So right around this time was at the height of that kingdom as well. It's now Southern Benin, I think is how you pronounce it. And sorry guys if we're mispronouncing any names here.
People's Republic of Benin.
There you go, People's Republic of Benin. And this type of monarchy was so unique for Africa too. The king also had like commoners come to court and everything. And not only did you have a man, you also had a woman to go alongside that commoner to give advice to the king. It was so cool. It was kind of like an egalitarian sort of monarchy where people actually had a say. And they did conquer a lot of territories around them. This was a mighty kingdom during that time. And they assimilated people into their culture through marriage, uniform laws, things like common traditions of enmity. So it was just really cool to see. And they did organize a lot of this stuff around war and everything, like you were saying. They had that standing military. And that's one of the reasons why they were so mighty, like you said. And, they, on their boundaries, they did capture slaves during this time. And the slaves were either sold to Europeans or exchanged for weapons and, or, for these palm oil trees and everything, they use these slaves to help with that business venture. It's not a business venture.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to sugarcoat reality here.
Can't.
And that the Dahomey, being a warring nation, made a very lucrative amount of monetary gain based off the prisoners of war that they would take and then sell into slavery. Some of the slaves they kept for themselves. In fact, the king had slaves, the generals, the Agojie had slaves. So they were involved in that sort of thing. They received pressure from the British Empire to give up the slave trade. And so about 30 years after this movie takes place is when they actually got rid of, or they took themselves out of the involvement with the slave trade.
It was about 1840, I think, is when, Britain put an end to the overseas slave trade. So that's when they had to transition into palm oil exports and things like that.
Yeah. So it doesn't line up exactly with what we see here. Again, I think that the purpose of this movie is really to give African American women strong role models, a strong historical story to look to for inspiration.
Absolutely. And for a movie like this, like you guys got to realize with movies and everything, sometimes the historical accuracy has to be shaped in a way that it is true to the form of what we're trying to portray, but not exactly accurate. And I think that the message and what we get to see is very insightful and helps us learn more. And so that's the nice thing about these movies is it piques our interest into diving deeper into really understanding the history and everything. And it does that. And I think it's very respectful of the history that actually occurred in the Kingdom of Dahomey. So I very much appreciated that. So while they took a lot of liberties in the history, the broad strokes are there for this
Mm-hmm.
film, and it's a decent facsimile of what the Kingdom of Dahomey was like in the 1800s. So we get a picture of it. It's not exact, and that's okay. It's an amazing film. So
Yeah.
let's go into our ratings of the show, if you don't mind, Matt. So what would you give this one?
Yeah, so for me, like I said, I really loved the performances of the actors. I loved the setting. I loved how it was shot. I loved the direction. And I loved that they took their time to get parts of the historical content accurate. Now, some of the liberties that they took, I thought, were not quite as justified. I would have liked to see them be a little bit more accurate to the historical context, even when it comes to some of the not so glorious aspects of this story with the Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade. And so knowing that after the movie did take it down a little bit for me, but taking the film as its own material, it's always a balancing act for me. I see it a movie that champions itself as being based on actual events. I'd like to see those actual events portrayed with the accuracy of the unique story that is actually out there to learn about. And so, yes, the film makes me curious about that story enough that I went out and looked up a bunch of stuff, but disappointed in that they didn't spend a little bit more time making this just a little bit more accurate. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to give this movie a rating of 8 out of 10. I really liked the movie. I would definitely see it again. I would definitely recommend it to my friends and family. And so, yeah, 8 out of 10 for me. How about you, Chris?
Woo! 8 out of 10 for Matt. So I absolutely love this movie. I came out of the theater feeling like I gained something. I felt like I got a new perspective. I was awestruck with every element of this movie. I love the performances. Like, I felt emotionally engaged in these performances, in these actors, and the characters that were portrayed in this. I went through this struggle with them. I got lost in the movie. So for me, I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. This was the best movie that I've seen in 2022 by far. And I was just amazed with every part of it. I loved it so much. It easily showed me a story and a history that I didn't know about. And I absolutely love that. And how often does that happen to us in the movie theater and in these stories that we're covering? So I really was affected, and I enjoyed it. So 10 out of 10 for me and 8 out of 10 for Matt. Viewing it from beginning to end as a single story, I can't say enough of good things. And I think it's definitely something all of you should check out, and comment below on what you guys thought too.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you got everything out of it that you did, that you had a good time. I had a good time. This is well worth the money. Go out and watch The Woman King as soon as you can.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, guys, that's our review of The Woman King. Thanks for joining us here today. So, if you can, you should dive into hitting that subscribe button for us and supporting this channel. And we got a lot of good content coming out from all the fandoms. So don't expect us to review an awesome movie coming out in the theater every single week. This is just, we've been able to find a couple of diamonds in the rough in the last couple of weeks. So it's been a lot of fun. And we hope that you guys have a great day and a fantastic week. And so from our families to yours, adios.